Guys, if you can, I can request if you can take your seats, we can start the session. I think this is the one thing which we are talking since morning, that there are a lot of initiatives which we can take. There is a lot of effort which can go in, but at the end of the day, it requires certain financing, certain funding. Do we agree with that? Raise your hand if you feel that the climate interventions require funding. Only 2-3 people? Do we need climate finance? Great. Okay. So everybody who has raised the hand, they will get a certain chunk. The people who haven't raised the hand, they will not get anything. So be aware of that. So we will run a session and we will try to explore different areas. And I think one of the term which I would like first to start with, and that's the term which we talk a lot, but it's not very well understood. So starting with you, Michael, you are working on a carbon credit, right? And there's a certain understanding which exists that whatever we do, if I put my solar panel there, I am eligible for the carbon credit, and I can go and sell that one and make money out of it. If I have planted 10 trees, there should be a carbon credit and all that. So if you can help people understand in a layman language, what does it mean and how that criteria work and what is eligible for carbon credit and what is not. So if you can help the audience to understand, and then we can build that conversation further from a carbon credit side. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Michael Blank. I'm from Dubai, and I'm honored to be here on behalf of Nutshell, and I appreciate their hospitality and the invitation. I'm chairman of an ADGM company out of Abu Dhabi by the name of Prism Holdings, and we have our administrative offices in Ras Al Khaimah in the free zone in the UAE. With regard to carbon credits and with regard to the carbon marketplace, obviously it's a genre that we hear about all the time, and it's been quite confusing, and it's been a gray area for the last 20 years. Governments like Pakistan and other governments around the world have all committed to reducing carbon emissions with regard to Paris Accords and their ESG requirements. Pakistan has a 15%. They've committed to reduce their emissions by 15% by 2030. This, as you said aptly, is expensive. A lot of governments and a lot of companies and a lot of industries and sectors don't have a process for it. They don't have the capital reserve for it, but everyone is committed to it. What we have done is looked at the marketplace over the last 20 years and created a vertically integrated company called Prism Carbon Solutions. We're able to formalize this process at no cost to the government or no cost to the emitters, and we're able to process carbon credits through various different sectors like oil and gas, through reduction of emissions, and through forests. We're currently working in 12 countries around the world where we have mandates and contracts with not only governments but private industry and concessionaires, where we facilitate the process of certification, verification, validation. We have the most advanced digital registry in the world for transparency with NFTs on the blockchain, and we use a digital registry banking system for housing the carbon credits. So what we've tried to do is create a process that facilitates for not only government but private industry in an area that's been quite complicated and quite expensive. And then we have the capability of monetizing the carbon credits and bringing top-line revenue back to industry and back to governments so that it can create sustainability projects. So when you ask me about specific carbon credits, there are carbon credits that are available in approximately 24 different sectors. We concentrate on 2 sectors. That's oil and gas industry, which are the greatest emitters, and we also concentrate on forests, which are the greatest receivers of the carbon credits. So we're on the buy side, sell side, and we make the process quite simple for both government and private industry at no cost to them.
So, thank you, Michael. I think that if we go back to that, the key point is that there's a process, there's a data point, there's a validation, there's a blockchain involved, there's a transparencies. So all those points need to be there to just go and get your, whatever the effort you are doing right now for the reduction of carbon, that can become a carbon credit. So it's not just that you put something up and you can come next day and say there's a carbon credit side. We will explore that further. Nadi, coming to your side, and there's a lot of conversation which is happening around, and it's happened in the morning as well, where people are talking about their projects, but they're not bankable. Like GCF it doesn't fulfill the criteria for GCF or GEF. And once you are coming from a planning commission perspective, which is supposed to be the heart of everything, where all the projects comes down and analyzed properly, and that's where the next data sets and the business cases which are being developed. So what's your view, the type of projects you are getting, and whether those are bankable in terms of the GCF, GEF, or any other climate fund which is out there to really support those projects? Sajjeed.
Thank you, Sajjeed. So the number that you're familiar with, Pakistan needs about 340 billion to become climate resilient by 230. We need about $200 billion to achieve our NDCs. So that's the size of the problem, that's the size of the challenge. And the government requires a coherent response and a systemic response. We need a coherence of policies, and then according to those policies, we have to bring in, align our programs and develop projects accordingly. And that would require mainstreaming of climate finance levers across the system. Because climate finance is cross-cutting. You have decarbonization of the industry, the agriculture sector, then you have adaptation for disaster resilience and agriculture, so it's cross-cutting. We will need to introduce levers of climate finance across all policies. So that's an exercise that we are taking at the Planning Commission. And the government has to bring in climate finance or sustainable finance broadly into its financial planning. So the country is debt distressed. We need flows, carbon finance flows. My colleague Michael spoke about carbon finance. We need to factor in carbon finance, climate finance, and we need to look at disaster risk finance. And we also have to look at greening of our debt, which would include debt for climate swaps. Yes, debt to nature swaps. So we have to look at a host of instruments and factor them into the financial planning of the country. There are two reasons there are two imperatives for the government to do this. One is to reduce the overall cost of financing. We are an emerging market, a developing country. The cost of finance is very high. And concessional loans from climate finance and its climate-related associated loans would reduce the cost of financing for Pakistan. We are aware with the cuts everyone is aware that US aid has introduced cuts in spending, and we are going to see an overall decline in official development assistance from across all OECD countries. It's expected that it's going to come down by 25% by 2027. So we will have to do a lot more with the funding that we have. So the question is not how much more climate finance we can bring into the country, but how can we target it better. So improving our public financial management practices and preparing, that brings me to your question of better projects, preparing better projects so that we are able to actually achieve climate outcomes. And with the lesser funding that we have, we should be able to crowd in private investment. And private investment only flows when the project is, as we say, investable and it has the right returns. So we are now working, we've had a shift in our working with development partners. So multilateral development funding that is going to come into the country, it's going to, instead of that directly financing our projects, it's going to be used with grant and guarantee mechanism combination to reduce the cost of financing and de-risk private sector to bring in additional projects. So naturally, if this is going to have that MDB oversight, it's going to review the pipelines in a manner that we prepare and align our current pipeline and bring it and make it investable so that we are able to bring in the private sector. So we are going through that exercise as we speak, and we are also targeting the capital market. Pakistan is going to issue the inaugural green panda bond. It's going to be listed in the Shanghai Stock Exchange. For that, we are preparing a pipeline. And the process of, and we're working with Citi and Deutsche to select the projects and have the right transaction advisories in place. So this process has started in the government to align our portfolio and to reorient it towards the various instruments that are available. We have to remember that climate finance is not only funds. It's also all of these instruments, guarantees, de-risking instruments, panda bonds, debt swaps. So there's a host of instruments, and all of them require a different structure of a project.
No, definitely. Now, I'll come back to you with the one question, so we will continue this conversation. The question would be, who from a government side has a primary responsibility to raise that money? Because there's a MOCC, there's a finance ministry, there's a planning commission. So how that coordination is happening? Because there was a question in an earlier one, is it the work happening on the paper in the silo? Because it's a fantastic thing which you are talking about. Who is executing? What are the timelines? And which ministry is going to take the lead? So I'll come back to that questions later. So Faisal, coming from the Mashreq Bank, and I think that's a wonderful story. I tell most of the time how you move from a brick and mortar structure and how you move towards the total as a digital bank there. So as a head of ESG and a corporate strategy, and particularly if you talk from a Pakistan perspective as well as from a Middle East perspective, the selection of the project and the screening while you are making investment or you are extending loan or even you are taking a customer on board, now there's a lot of consideration which knowing your customer not only in terms of the identity, but you have to go through the activities they are engaged or involved in, which like Pakistan has also introduced that green taxonomy to identify those activities. So as a Mashreq Bank, how you are implementing those screening criteria to select the projects or the activity where you should raise money or you should invest money?
Thank you very much for hosting me today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. One of the things that we need to highlight is when we talk about sustainable finance, it's not a banking issue anymore. It's an ecosystem that needs to kickstart, and we need to accelerate it to achieve the climate ambition. If we talk about ESG risks and ESG risks subclasses, whether it's a project or a client or an obligor who needs money to achieve his energy transition, or it's a community who requires social financing, we need to have Ministry of Finance, we need to have the central banks sitting on a round table, which is already happening in UAE, but we need to see it in other countries also, discussing how to materialize and accelerate the climate ambition or ESG and sustainability in general. Saying so, we need to look at tax rebate. This is a very sensitive subject. Usually lots of countries are cautious when the private sector talks about tax rebate. Why? If I lose, I will stop funding. One bad scenario will cause private sector to back off from providing the highly required sustainable finance needed. And if the private sector will step back, government alone will not operate as a bank, and they will never achieve their sustainability objectives, whether it's the 17 SDGs or the commitments made in Paris Convention or energy transition ambition. If we talk about energy transition finance, and my colleague here mentioned that there is 200 billion required, I believe the numbers are changing by the second. Why? First, urbanization is not stopping. It's evolving by the minute. Two, when we look at disrupting and emerging technology such as AI and cryptocurrency, fintech in general, etc., they are adding challenges. They have their own positive side, of course, but they are adding the challenges. Why? If we look at AI energy demand globally, specifically with the big companies today, if we look at Google, Meta, and others, Microsoft included, they are talking about creating their own nuclear reactors to meet their energy ambition. And if we look at countries like us in the UAE or Pakistan, we have 4 nuclear civilian reactors in UAE. But are they going to meet our demand? The current estimation, they will meet 40%, 30% of the consumption by 2030. But with the exponential growth in demand when it comes to cooling for AI, and when we talk about vertical farming to address our food security issues, that's another challenge. In the UAE, for example, 60% of the consumption of energy in summer is for cooling purposes. Yeah. And we are not talking about AI, and we are not talking about vertical farming yet. In winter, that's an excess energy that we can export easily. This is an opportunity for private sector, government sector, to talk about creating a huge grid, a global grid, where
and
energy...
transmission.
Yeah, it could be a marine cable.
Yeah, yeah.
Where we can exchange this energy in winter to Pakistan and India and the region. Why? It will be affordable by us to export, and it's highly needed in winter for heating purposes and for industry.
True.
We need to think out of the box, and we need to bring realities and numbers. Investing and reinventing the wheel in infrastructure will never make sense when it comes to generating the highly needed energy.
No, great. So climate finance, we are talking about the ecosystem where all the value chain partner, public-private partnership, reporting data, that information flow freely and timely so people can make decision and they can take it forward from there. The one thing which we struggle in COP as well, and also whenever we start talking about the climate finance, getting a very specific answer is a very, very difficult thing, and that's evolving field, and that's totally understandable. It's an unknown area, it's evolving, we are going to get there, but I think which Nadia picked up, that it's not a one financial instrument, there are multiple financial instruments, and we have to start again talking about the capacity building, that how the projects should be developed, the business case should be developed, but for which specific financial instrument, and how the ecosystem is going to support that entire financial instrument, because it's not going to be the conventional way somebody sending a money and somebody repaying it back. It has to be certain KPI driven, then it's become a climate finance, and it has to be very visible that what's happening with that money. Even for the carbon credit, now it's required what the proceed you are getting back, where you are deploying that one. If you are deploying that again in a mission activity or something which emit the carbon again, so you will start losing the value of that one or resale of that project. Coming to you, Atta, there is a lot of conversation happening right now, and we are seeing Sharia compliant, ESG aligned. That term is also coming up now as a one of an index as well. It's also coming up as a financial instruments as well, where they have started talking about Sharia compliant instruments as well as which are aligned with the ESG. And in one of my previous conversation, there's a consensus that ESG and Sharia compliance is very, very close. It's ethical, it has to doing the right thing for the right reason, whether we talk environment, social or governance. So those are key principles which exist in Sharia as well as in the ESG side. So how you in a Bank Islami are looking to become an intermediary for climate finance or creating your own product and fund those kind of products. So what kind of projects you are looking at and what kind of products you are looking at, how the Bank Islami is going to play their role in climate finance domain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakallah khair for asking. I think it's not only the Bank Islami, I think it's the It's a countrywide need and worldwide need, obviously. So I'll break it into 2-3 parts. First, there is a great example of Indonesia and Malaysia where they have come up with these sukuk, Sharia compliant sukuk, and one worth of about $2 billion, $3 billion. We still have to do a lot more. Just one example in Pakistan of WAPDA, and that's very small amount. I'll break it into 3 things. First is the first sukuk initiative about this is should be through the government, and that has to be SLR compliant, which means it's a regulatory requirement for the banks to place certain amount of their liabilities deposit in the government. So that is about, if we have about 35-36 trillion worth of rupees deposits as an industry, and about more than 15% has to be kept with them. So that huge amount which is readily available or can be readily available to put into Sharia compliant sukuks. And then the entire Islamic banking is going to be converted to Sharia compliant by 31st December 2027. So I think that huge funds will be available and still are available that can be deployed in Sharia compliant sukuk. And number 2, I think I must say that you rightly said that Sharia compliant and ESG go hand to hand. It's the same. Islamic banking, Sharia compliant banking is ethical banking. So it's all about doing ethical things, and the large corporate in Pakistan, and especially the exporters, they have to compete many countries and to comply with the international regulations for green energy and other certification. So the private sector should be coming up asking for funds from the banks, financial institution, and investor through stock exchange to come up with the green sukuks and requirement for ESG requirements. Third one, which is very suitable for our type of economies, is PPP, public-private partnership. That hybrid model is worth doing for our economies like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, where governments are normally slow and the public sector is faster. So I think that model can be very useful to generate quick funds and to invest in all this green initiative, solar, wind, hydro, that can work for Pakistan. I think the amount of money that our colleague is talking about, $100 billion or more, that can be done, but our economy size is not that big. And we are not still ready as a nation to do it. But I think first step has been already taken. And I think with the government, public-private partnership, and initiative by the large corporate, this is possible to create an environment which should encourage the green energy scope. Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, you raised one thing, and I think that's the audience would like to understand it better. You said that you can help channelize the carbon credit and the carbon finance with no cost to government or a private sector. So if you can elaborate that a little bit, what do you need from government or a private sector to work on that framework where they can get access to that kind of carbon credit or a finance against the carbon credit, please?
As we discussed on the panel, there's a $200 billion figure that Pakistan is looking at in terms of becoming ESG compliant and committing their 15% carbon emission reduction. We have a methodology that we've been using right now in 12 different countries where we create our formula where we go to the government, and the governments, as in Pakistan's case, does not have the reserve capital. Many of the countries that we deal with don't have hard currency, and the hard currency is a commodity. So we go to the government and we say to them, we will self-fund as PRISM the entire project. The only thing we need from you is latitude and longitude, in this case using the example of forests. And then we will do a feasibility study at our cost, an economic analysis at our cost of the monetization of the ultimate carbon credits, and then a time frame of when they will be monetized. In addition to that, we can create green bonds, and in addition to that, we have a methodology of selling our carbon credits, and we're the only company in the world that does this in bulk And as you know, carbon credits are annually renewable. So this is a real windfall for the government, because we sell to, airlines, chemical companies, oil and gas industry, mining companies, the largest emitters in the world, even states and cities. But what's more important, we have a methodology of creating what I call a carbon reserve, which is maintaining the digital assets in a digital bank and then borrowing against them for the benefit of sustainability projects within country. So there's a lot of different opportunities here. We are totally Sharia compliant. So we really do it on a bespoke basis, based on government needs, based on private industry needs. We can formulate on a bespoke basis whatever financial document or financial formula is necessary. My background is law and banking, so we're able to bring that to the forefront to help the clients.
I think that's a very good and ideal example of how the financial instrument look like, where you are using a certain right and converting that right into a financial flow. So I think these are the things where Pakistan or as a ministry, we might have to go more in R&D and look what kind of other financial instrument exist out there which we can replicate for Pakistan, what we can localize for Pakistan. I'm sure we cannot replicate everything. Like Amazon, the one which have raised 1.5 billion very recently and they are using a non-timber revenue to repay that loan. If you look at the financial instrument, there are 20 different parties, there are different kind of guarantees. So this is not a very straightforward financial instrument. So there has to be a proper research and the structure there. So Nadia, a final question for the panelists. Who in Pakistan is responsible to raise that money to fund the NDC, which is $348 billion as per the last number? It might change going forward. So who has a primary responsibility to raise that money in the next 5 years?
So we talked about how climate finance is made up of different instruments and different funds. For UNFCCC funds, which include the Green Climate Fund, it is the Ministry of Climate Change. So Ministry of Climate Change is the national designated authority for the UNFCCC. So GCF, GEF, and Adaptation Fund, it's a Ministry of Climate. For authorized credits under the carbon markets, it's a Ministry of Climate Change. For public-private partnership, it's a Public-Private Partnership Authorities and the Planning Commission. It's a subsidiary body of the Ministry of Planning. And for blended finance, it's a planning commission, because we approve the debt finance that goes into public infrastructure and public projects. So for blended finance to work with MDBs, it's going to be the Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs divisions, so that we negotiate our loans accordingly. Ministry of Finance for sovereign bonds.
Okay.
So Ministry of Finance takes its projects from the Planning Commission. So the asset register comes from us. It's a combination. So it's an ecosystem, and there are very clear rules of business as to who is responsible for what. There is no one primary, because climate finance, if you unbundle it, it's more, we unbundled it in the climate finance strategy, it's more than 25 different activities. We talked about the green taxonomy that's being done by...
the reporting, the law, the policies.
That's by SECP is doing the reporting for the firms. Green taxonomy is being built by the State Bank, and that's for greening the private sector. And then corporate green bonds can be issued also. So climate finance is a host of activities, and all of those would have to be operationalized for us to meet the challenge that we are faced with. And it's in our interest to do it for adaptation and mitigation. Second, to do it for reducing overall cost of borrowing for the country, reducing our debt. And third, for economic transformation towards greener solutions, which we need to remain relevant in international value chains, and to bring in innovation and to keep green jobs. So that the role of the private sector and enabling that is very relevant in unlocking the climate finance.
No, thank you very much. I think it's an important piece of information, something like which we were talking about the silo. There's a structure to that one, that how the responsibility is divided between the different ministries or department. And like Faisal highlighted earlier, it's not the matter of a one thing or other, it's a matter of an ecosystem. So that ecosystem need to work there. So just if you have any question, we have got one opportunity to take one or two questions, and then we will wrap it up. Any question from the audience? Yeah, please, you add meanwhile. Anybody who has a question, raise the hand and you will get the... Okay, there's a question. Please, you go ahead and we will...
When we talk about ESG taxonomy, it is something that we need in the private sector and in the banking.
Yeah.
If the government doesn't tell us what's highly prioritized to them, it will be difficult for us to discuss subsidies and tax rebate. And until today, ESG is usually E only. It doesn't look at the poor farmer who need a diesel generator or a solar panel to pump water into his dry field. When we look at social financing and specifically microfinancing for such projects to help them adapt into climate change, they will struggle and the plants and the trees will die. And this is something we need to address because it not only covers food security, but it also will add the nature-based carbon credit.
Yep.
Trees, afforestation activities, etc. And today we need to sit in a round table, create, let's say, what we call ESG and Sustainable Finance Pakistan Accelerator, where government sector and private sector will sit together and exchange ideas. We will share our concerns and worries about losing or the investors' challenges, and the government will tell us what are the key prioritized projects. And by exchanging this open dialogue, we will have a high accelerated maturity level coming and happening in months. When we talk about food nexus, for example, it covers water management, energy, and food factories. Agriculture is no more a field. It's a food factory.
Yeah.
And Food Nexus is the title for the future. With the growing population of Pakistan and becoming a hub for food security for GCC and other places like Europe, etc., Food Nexus is the way forward.
No, definitely. And Faisal, you picked up the right thing. It's given, again, you picked up the ecosystem, and Nadia picked up how it's divided, and also Michael picked up that how he has shared the one example of how the entire financial flow works there, and Atta also shared that how the sukuk and the green banking and the Sharia compliant thing we can bring. And I think the important point is that today, like we are sitting here and we are talking about that, we understand it's a complex field, right? It's complex because we haven't made an effort to make it known. So it's unknown right now. We have to sit together and make it more known. We have to go through the simplification process, and the world has done that. We can create 5, 10, 15 different financial instruments which are fit for purpose and address the ecosystem, and not only the E but the S and G as well, to make sure that whatever is happening in terms of the social side, that's also addressed, because environment challenge or vulnerability raised to the next thing, which is involuntary migrations, which create a health crisis, which create a housing crisis going forward. So I think these are the areas which are important to create that kind of, and that's as for you, to create a smaller group where people can sit together and talking about the SDGs and the NDC from a public sector and development sector, and taking it to the private sector in the ESG and green taxonomy and the financial instrument. That could be one of our opportunities. We have one question there. You have to be very specific and quick.
So I hope I don't have to introduce myself.
No,
again.
you have to.
Do I have to? Okay. So this is Sajjeed Aslam, I'm donor coordinator consultant with the Prime Minister, AJ&K, and we are steering the SDG unit also. So this session on the future of climate finance, why are we only looking at the bigger picture of the climate finance of the big dollars and the big rupees? We are actually not investing in the social behavior change. You see, the entry point is, since we have a faith-based economy, yeah? So that's an entry point where you can actually raise the climate finance from the household level. And you don't have to look up to the other people to provide you the finance for the climate change. So they're the smaller changes that you can do from the ground level, utilizing the youth, utilizing the academia, and utilizing the religious leaders for this social behavior change. And Madam, since the ministry has come up with a great framework, I really like it, the roadmap of the 5 E's. So let's see how we can integrate the social behavior change for all the SDGs. And for the sustainability, the SDG units that the UNDP along with the MOPDSI has established, we need to sustain those institutions for the sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think in the morning, specifically, Madam Aisha Secretary, she raised that one as one of her key interventions, the change in the social behaviors. So that's one of our intervention which MOCC has already came up as a part of their policy intervention, other than the capacity building and all that. So there are certain areas which are being discussed in the morning as well. Sorry. Any other, please. I have the sign time's up, so be very specific and quick. And also address that, who you are addressing the question to, right?
Thank you very much. This is Imranul Haq. Actually, I would lead from the what Honorable Minister, Mr. Musqaddam Malik was talking about. Actually, Pakistan is one of the victims of the climate change, which is not very indigenous. So how this taxonomy thing will address the issue which Pakistan is facing right now? Mr. Atta maybe would be the appropriate person to answer the question, please.
I think she's expert in taxonomy. She'll be able to really. You talked about taxonomy. Yeah.
So the taxonomy identifies which processes and are eligible for green finance. So whether they are for adaptation or mitigation. So if it's for adaptation, it would help us expand green financing towards activities that require that kind of funding. So it's basically an instrument which helps you expand credit in a certain direction. To answer your question, the taxonomy directly is the money has to be raised and then directed through those into those activities. Those activities for adaptation have to be defined.
May I elaborate on something?
Yeah, please.
If we look at the UAE experience in COP28, 5 banks managed to commit to invest 1,000 billion dirhams by 2030 on sustainable finance. The money is there, but the taxonomy is critical to create the bilateral relationship between financial institutions and the banks. If we lose money, we will stop funding. The governments need to step forward and to acknowledge and enable us. If we lose a prioritized project that reflects the needed money in a prioritized project, then tax rebate and other incentives are eligible. In addition, when we talk about the taxonomy, we should make sure that we don't fall into the same mistake as the European Union, focusing on the green only, neglecting the social.
No, thank you. So I think that's answered your question. Taxonomy is a categorization. The type of money is a separate decision, whether it's a grant, it's a debt, or it's a equity. So that could be a different one. But the categorization of activity is important to identify that it's being invested in a right activity or not.
So, add very briefly,
we totally
building on Faisal's point, the government is making the green taxonomy, and we have also developed a sustainable finance framework, which includes the S component. So that is for the bond market right now. Thank you.
No, it's quite a comprehensive green taxonomy if you look at that, what is coming up, and the framework for the climate finance. So if we put together, that's working out very fine. Guys, thank you very much. A big round of applause for our panelists. And thank you for being such a patient audience. Thank you very much.